Anyone can be a steward. Anyone. You, me. What matters is finding a way of stewardship that makes sense to you, that is accessible to you, that fills you up. Sometimes we find stewards in the community, and they inspire us where to go next. I'm Eva Moore, and this is Be the Change, Stewardship in the Nature Journal community. First time doing this, so here I go. I'm Eva Moore, and I am so happy to be here with Roseann Hanson today, interviewing her about her stewardship work. So welcome, Roseann. I'm so happy I get to talk to you and hear more about just all of the coolness that you've been doing. How are you
Oh,
today?
thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And this is such an important project. The whole idea of stewardship has woven through my life for, gosh, more than 40 years. So this is so, so special for me.
Awesome. If you don't mind, maybe we could start with kind of an impromptu question. How do you define stewardship?
Oh, great question. Stewardship means something different to all of us. And to me, stewardship means committing myself to not just a place, but a whole ecosystem to not just learn more about it, because that's what we do when we nature journal. We fall in love with a place and we dive into it and we learn and learn and learn. But then we come to this point of, wow, well, this place might be fragile, or there's something that might need our attention. And being able to dive into that and maybe in a little tiny way come up with a way to protect it, or a piece of it is my definition of stewardship.
I love that. To be able to protect a little piece of that place that we fell in love with. That's a beautiful definition. Please, you were saying that you've been in process of doing the stewardship work and embodying stewardship for 40 years now. I'd love it if you would tell me about yourself and where's home for you, where did you grow up, and what made you fall in love with nature?
Oh, wow. Good questions. So I was very fortunate to grow up in the east part of Tucson, Arizona, in the southern part of the state, and grew up with nature at my doorstep. So we had vast amounts of wildlands right outside our door. That's why my parents chose the place to raise their children. They came from California, and before that, the East Coast, and they just knew that they wanted the kids to be out where nature could be right there. Somehow they knew that nature had an effect on development and just helping kids become stronger and more confident. So they wanted to make sure their kids grew up that way. So all my siblings and I, all five of us, grew up just running amok in nature. And I studied ecology and evolutionary biology in college. That's where I met my husband, who is also studying that. Was also a journalism major, so I'm a communicator and a scientist. So they've always gone together. And I started keeping field notes and nature journals probably when I was 8 years old. So for 50 years, I've been keeping a little nature notebook. My dad built me a weather station when I was 8. And so every day I would run out, I was like 8 years old, run out with my little notebook, and I would record the weather in my notebook. And that really became my first nature journal, because that was my first idea of paying attention to nature and to something bigger than myself. And so thank you, Dad, for giving me that gift. And my nature journal, my journals were always very scientific. Probably because of my dad, who was an engineer. And so they were always words. These are my old journals. They were just words, and recording lists and species. But over time, I started wanting to add more sketches, and that's how I kind of got more into the visual side of journaling. So more sketching in the last 10 years or so. I really added a lot of art, and that was very special to me. But recording what was going on around me has been part of my life for, yeah, I want to say really seriously, for 40 years.
That's awesome. And major props to your parents for having that foresight and that vision to want their kids to grow up in in nature.
I know, and giving us the freedom to go out, and they trusted us to go explore. And they always just said, be smart, don't get hurt. Or if you don't get hurt, do it by the road so we can find you.
Smart.
um, no, but that was such a part of my development, and my husband too. He grew up much the same way in the wilds, and we just became who we were because of nature. So I feel like giving back, stewardship, is what I can give back to what nature has given me.
Love that. And I'm curious, you said that your dad built you a weather station at 8. That's so cool. And why weather? What interested you about weather at that
Oh,
age?
wow, good question. So my parents were both endlessly curious, and that's where I got it from. They were always trying new things and doing new things, and my dad was a scoutmaster, so always attuned to not just being in nature, but also bringing kids into nature. So the whole scouting thing. But the only thing available for girls at my age at that time was Cub Scouts, Girl Scouts, the little ones. And honestly, Evia, they had a sewing and making hot pads and learning cooking so we could cook for our husbands. And I was just like, okay, this isn't really what I want to do, Dad. And so he's like, okay, you can join the Boy Scouts. So he let me join the Boy Scouts. And then we got to camp and do cool things and go rock hounding and weather. So the whole weather merit badge thingy just really, I don't know, it just really got me. And so he built it's called a Stevenson screen, which is a white wooden box because it houses all the instruments. And that's what everybody used back in the day to house their weather instruments from the Weather Service on down. And every day at 4 o'clock is when you would get the weather.
So cool.
I know.
And to think that part of it was excited by the weather badge. I never
I
got
know.
I never got to go into Boy Scouts, and I remember I mean, I never knew that there were even more opportunities where I live. And with Girl Scouts, I'd always buy the cookies. And so hearing what you said about how they just wanted you to learn sewing and basically home ec stuff is like, that registers. I'm imagining a lot of girls going, this isn't what I signed up for. I wanted to go play outdoors.
Doing, outdoor stuff. This is so cool. But no, that wasn't cool. So thankfully I had my dad. So
That's awesome. Thank you for telling me more about how you grew up to love nature. And so I'd love to know more about your stewardship work. If yeah.
yeah. Well, it was such a great opportunity. So in the mid 1990s, my husband and I had an opportunity to we were asked to write a book. We were naturalists and writers, and we were asked to write a book that it became the Southern Arizona Nature Almanac. And this has been in print now since 1997. And it's a month-by-month guide to what's going on in nature in southern Arizona. So it's literally almanac style, which means you open it up and there's like, okay, here's May. What's happening in May at this time? But no one had ever done that. So we had to get the data. We had to go learn, what's blooming, who's breeding, who's doing what's happening in May during this time. So we took 3 years of field study and went on a monthly basis, visited field sites that represented each of the life zones in our region. So everything from the lower Sonoran Desert up to the Ponderosa pine forests on the life zones. And we took vast notes. And so here are some of the notes. I archived my journals in 3-ring binders. I've done this since the beginning. So here is March in 1995 of there we go. One of the first of our field study sites where we visited, stop 1, milepost, what elevation, what life zone, time, temperature, and then it's just a long list of everything that I'm hearing. Question marks, my first little sketches. These are my very first drawings in my nature journal. Little sketches of, oh, what snail is that? What's this tiny blue flower? Eriastrum ended up being, and just, we did this for years, studying, going back to the same transects. They're called transects. You choose, as you know, you choose a point to walk from point to point, and you record everything you're seeing and hearing. And that became the basis for our almanac, which we ground truth with scientific studies done by other people. And we drew the photos and the diagrams. Both Jonathan and I did the photos from the illustrations and the photos from everything from the astronomy to bird diagrams, different everything. So it was a very special project. We just realized this year, it's like, oh my goodness, that's going on almost 30 years. We need to go back. And so how is this stewardship? So this is observing one place, adopting a place, adopting these transects over time. Now we're going back. We started this year because we need to update the book. And so here we are, I started, this is April. I haven't done May yet. We need to wait another week. But, here we are doing the same thing almost 30 years later. And the first thing I noticed was at least one species that was very common at the lowest life zone I couldn't find until I got to the next life zone. So it looks like this one species, which is a small shrub called ratany, range ratany, has moved up in elevation over time, possibly, right? Maybe from climate change, I don't know yet. This is one of the things we look at, but it's really fun to go, now I'm doing a lot more sketching and species drawing because I'm much more confident. Thanks to John Muir laws, I've got more pencil miles under my belt. So I can sketch the red-faced warbler now and color it, where before I couldn't do that. So that was fun. So we'll be spending the next 2 years redoing these constantly to see what's changed. For one thing, the top of the mountain is gone.
Gone?
We had a catastrophic fire in 2020. called the Bighorn Fire. And it was way too hot and fast for the forest to survive because of suppression of fire over time. There was too much fuel. And the top of the mountain is bare. We counted, let me look. We've counted 20 pine trees at the end of the transect. 20. Where in the past there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pine trees. But in our, at the time where we could stand and pivot, we counted 20 trees left alive with tiny little tufts. So we're anxious to see, what are there going to be? Are the squirrels going to be there? Are how are the woodpeckers are they going to be there? Who's going to be there? I don't know. So that's a kind of stewardship, is to observe.
Observing, and that dedicated way that you and your husband, 3 years is awesome, because then you can see, like, not only I'm imagining like that's a huge range of like all the different life zones to cover, but then you're also noticing what sort of the average of the data is among those 3 years, and you're seeing what the norm looks like. And that's dedicated, scientifically, like how am I saying this? Scientifically minded, where you're careful about procedures and whatnot, thoughtful about those things. And then that you made this knowledge available to other people is like, that's a deeply valuable resource to have for people who live there.
So we hope so. And then we'll update the book.
Mm-hmm.
And we're very mindful of also not conflating correlation with causation. So just because we're not seeing XYZ, or we're observing this species when we didn't before, doesn't mean it's caused by what we might think. You don't want to insert your emotions into it too much. So is it climate change? We don't know. We can just record the data and let that stand and put it out there. And then hopefully later others and more data will help us determine. Certainly anthropocentric change, the Anthropocene, the fire caused changes, definitely I can say that's caused changes. And the reason much of the fire regimes have changed is because of human causes. So I'm confident with that one.
And that's huge. I love that you're going back to look at those areas again and see what changed, to see like you mentioned about that one shrub, the way that it's no longer in this life zone that it once was quite numerous in, is that people can then interpret and question what caused that change, but the fact that they're even made aware of it is so valuable.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, that's sort of why I support ventures like iNaturalist and whatnot when they do the community science, is because that's all adding data over time to see how the things change. And so for you two to do that, what do you think of education as a form of stewardship?
Oh my gosh, that's like the hugest form of stewardship, right? Because it's the only way we're going to pass on the love of nature. And that was one of our driving forces of our entire lives, is our love of the wild places is driven by wanting to pass that on. And the only way you can do that is to share it. And books are one of our important ways to share nature. We've written several dozen books together, and all about nature and travel. So we're definitely, education is a huge part of stewardship, for sure.
Absolutely. And I have a couple of your books, so I'm excited. When I see you, I'm definitely going to ask for your autograph.
Oh, that's wonderful.
My godmother and I are total like book author fanatics. So just, thank you for writing all your books.
Oh, and thank you for being book fans. Yay. We love it. I love it. Love it. You never have too many books.
Yep. Words after my own heart. I have to agree with you on that one. We can have too many books. And you already answered my next question, which was going to be what motivated you to do your stewardship work. And it sounds like what you were saying for both you and your husband was the love of those places and the desire to share that. Um,
Yeah, and for my husband especially, the place that we used for our transects is called the Santa Catalina Mountains, and he actually was born and raised right at the base of the mountain, and I was raised a little bit farther away, but literally this is his backyard. This is when he was 8 years old. He was hiking and backpacking up into these mountains from when he was a tiny kid. And so for him, it is his home.
Literally his home.
Yeah, literally.
That's wonderful. And my next question is, do you find any barriers to your stewardship work?
Good question. So sometimes there are barriers that you would expect, such as being confronted by the Forest Service when we first did the book. So the land is that we used as our transects is United States Forest Service. Um, there's no permit system or anything for the mountain, but when we started this again, because of the population increase, one of the barriers has been we need special permits to be there now, which is daunting for most people. So I'm kind of worried that, wow, if someone else wanted to do this, the thought of, petitioning and getting the right permits and paying the fee, and there's a fee now, that might keep people from doing this. Or hopefully there are other places that are a little more easy. I understand why they're doing it. It's because of overuse. They don't want to see the mountain overused, and especially with the fire we talked about, the ecosystem at certain elevations up are now super fragile. Private property was an interesting thing. Part of my transect from the beginning, while we're on a public road, I would walk the public road, but I'm looking into some private property because of where the transect is. And initially I thought I would have some issues with the landowners, but over time they've kind of, as we approached them and met them, they're like now super excited. But initially they were like, what are you doing here? Why are you using binoculars looking into my land? And so you always want to get that permission first, which we did. And occasionally people stop who are in the neighborhood and they're like, what are you doing? Which, it's okay for me because I realize, I kind of fit the demographic and everything. But if I were a person who didn't fit the demographic for this upper class white neighborhood, I would totally not be welcome. So I think this is, the foothills in Tucson is a very expensive neighborhood. People who live there are paying $1 to $3 million up for homes, which I know in the Bay Area is probably normal, but yeah. But where the median, I think, home in Tucson is 300,000. So yeah, there's a barrier for race and economics for sure.
That's a good barrier to keep in mind.
Yeah, and so that's just something we have to all keep working on.
Absolutely. But I have to ask, you said that when you're walking along the transects that you met some of the landowners and now they're excited to see you. Do they have your almanac?
What was funny? One woman did. She's like, oh my God, she was so excited. And then the other two didn't. So I'm learning to keep copies in my truck. Like, here, have a copy, give them a free copy. Just so they can know. Um, it's been fun.
That's awesome. Because I hear that and I'm like, I see some potential folks who might really benefit from your almanac. So
Yeah, and in retrospect, I should have, gotten them copies years ago because, yeah. But of course, you just don't, sometimes you don't think about that at a young age. I know how old we were in our 20s and early 30s when we started this.
that's so awesome. I think that's so awesome. Um, and let me see what my other questions were. My next question is already answered. It was going to be, do your nature journal your stewardship work? And you do.
Because it's kind of the core of it. It's my nature journal became this, that's what I often use this as an example of what your journals can become is sometimes it's just for you, but sometimes it can be for a broader audience. Sometimes it can be for other people to learn to fall in love with a place. And so that's the stewardship to me, is getting other people to fall in love with a place.
My hope someday is to take my own journals and create a book of some kind as well about my habitat restoration work.
Exactly. Yes. So the trick is not to think too hard about it, because when you think too hard about it and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm doing this journal for publication, you get all gripped and you're like, and you just need to do it and then go back later. Because I know if I think about a page and I'm like, oh my God, what if I'm going to publish this? And then I don't know, I get all gripped and it just isn't as good. I just have to turn off that part of my brain.
Wise words.
Yeah,
We start to self-edit, and it's like,
exactly.
edit the first draft like that. The first draft isn't where you think about every sentence, you just get it out there, gosh darn it. And so
Yeah.
it's like, same thing with your nature journal. So
Yeah. You don't want to strangle your creativity.
good point. Or the observations that you're noticing because you're worried that you don't know how to put it on the page in a way that is
Exactly.
nice
Yeah. You just
format.
have to knock that little editor off your shoulders. Bing. Yeah. Yeah, it's really been fun. And we'll see, next week we'll be heading out for the transects, and should be heavy duty into spring now. There was still snow the last time we went. So we'll see. It should be really interesting.
Ooh, I wonder how snow changes that place.
Oh, very much so. Snow is really important to the high country. But we had rain last night, so we'll have to see how that happened. That was unusual.
I'm one of those people who doesn't get snow, so
Yeah.
it's like, I just wonder so much about all the dynamics. Like if it snows and then it rains, then how does
Bad news. Well,
does that
bad news because it creates so when you have I'm in the Sonora Desert proper right now in the Arizona Upland Division, about 2,400 feet. And then the top of the mountain is well over 9,000 feet. So we like to say, we can drive from the equivalent of Mexico to Canada in a day.
wow.
From a life zone standpoint. So yeah, when we hit the top, it's almost 9,000 feet. And so we've got Douglas fir and ponderosa pines, and there used to be a spruce forest, but I understand the last of the spruces might have died in the fire. But so yeah, the snow at the top, if you get a lot of snow and then it rains on the snow, you get flood, which takes away soil and causes massive flooding in the down region. So it's quite interesting to be in such a gradient. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That sounds neat. And so if it doesn't rain and the snow remains, then does that act sort of like a water source throughout the next season when it gets to?
Exactly, that's what you really want. So we want a nice big snowpack, which we had this year, and and the bigger the snowpack, the better. And it's like, so in California, you guys were really worried about the huge snowpack, and too quick of a melt would overwhelm your reservoirs. And I think it's been okay. I think you actually dodged the bullet this year. You didn't have too fast of a melt. And so we have this similar, but smaller scale concerns. So yeah, the more snow, better. You don't want it to melt fast though.
Mm, okay, I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed for y'all that you
I think you're done.
get the happy, yeah, equilibrium where it needs to be. I have one more question before I just open it up to anything else you want to talk about, and that's that if folks wanted to do the type of stewardship work that you do in their own communities, what would they need to do it?
Good question. So my particular stewardship work was choosing one place to study over a long period. So it could be a year, 2 years. You can bite off something you can chew. It's like, when you give your kids advice, don't take more on your plate than you can eat. Do we listen? I don't know. But so if you think you can do a year, do a year, choose one place. Mine was pretty ambitious. It's a big deal to go this distance. It's 30 miles. It takes a full day once a month, if you can do that, or choose a place that you can walk to, maybe even your local park. It could be your backyard. And then you set up some variables that you repeat every time. So whether it's you're doing a square or a line, mine's a line, it's a transect. And then just go from there and see where it takes you. And I guarantee you, by the end, you're not going to want to stop.
That I completely believe. I'd imagine that getting to do that transect like that is like giving yourself permission to fall in love with the place over and over again each time that you do it.
Exactly. And then the cool thing is too, once you're at the end of that, something happens in your neighborhood. Say, something comes up where, say, someone wants to put there's a question about a new development on public land or a power line or something that the community is concerned about. You've got data. This is data. You can go before a committee. You can go before a meeting of your city council and say, I've been studying this area for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and this is why it's important. And you'll have this. Data is strength. Data is power. Science is power. So that's kind of where stewardship can also lead, not just falling in love, but it's like the secret weapon. It's the power to protect.
I agree with that, especially if it's a specifically written record, because
Yeah,
that's going to be
that's what people resonate with. We are visual animals. You can, hold this up and say, no, I've been studying this. These are the things that I've learned, and this is special, and we need to pass this on to our children. And if we bulldoze this or ruin it, then it's gone forever. But you have this connection you can share. You're the superpower now.
I love that. We're the superpower now. And
Yeah. Maybe we need like a figurine, the superpower nature journal cape and
yes,
yeah, exactly. Maybe we need a figure. Wouldn't that be fun?
would be so much fun. Okay, we should just have some fun with this and like try to design what we'd like it to look like.
I know who can help us. Do you know who can help us?
Which person? I can think of a few. Mark? Are you thinking Mark? Yes, Mark Simmons.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
Yes.
In fact, I do believe in one of the Wild Wonder conferences, if I'll go back and look at the recordings, I think he did a little doodle at some point of a nature journal superpower figure with a cape and a pen and a journal. If I'm
Ooh,
remembering correctly, we need to go back and look.
that would be awesome. Yeah, we should totally.
I don't think I imagined it, but if I didn't imagine it, it should be real.
I also feel like maybe he did one, and I feel like maybe Akshay did too. I
I
remember.
do. I totally remember this. So let's track it down.
Let's do it. I remember specifically it was when Akshay was talking about his origin story, and then he showed Jack in a superhero sort of.
Right. That's right. That definitely happened. And then I know Mark did something before that. So all
Okay.
right, we need to make it real.
Yes. Okay. I'm totally in agreement with that.
I love it.
Is there anything else like that we didn't cover in our questions that you'd want to share, or just thoughts that you have, or I don't know, highlights,
No,
things that.
I think we covered so much. And I think that the main takeaway is everyone is a nature journal steward. Every note that you take is stewardship. And what we're talking about with your projects and this kind of shining a light on stewardship is hoping to take it just a little bit step farther, but also just recognizing that all of us have the power to be superpower stewards, and what that form takes can be anything. It doesn't have to be a massive project. It doesn't have to be a book. There's a lot of us who have done books, but that doesn't define what a stewardship project is. I think that this project will reveal all the myriad ways that we can do.
I agree. It's going to be a beautiful mosaic when it's done.
I know, perfect way to put it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I've loved hearing about your work, and
Let's see if I can do this without wrecking my video, but these are just some of my notebooks there from the many years. You can see that's part of my archive. So yeah, it's really, that's stewardship, right? When you have these years of paying attention. Journaling is not just writing what we look at. It's what we see, feel, hear, and love. And love is the ultimate stewardship.
love is the ultimate stewardship. I relate.
Nice.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.